All right, guys, it's busy coming up on the board there. So I've just put in the ticks as well according to the actual memo so that you can see exactly what you would have gotten. All right, the first one there, guys, that is a quadratic equation, but it's one that's already been factorized. So now if you know kind of the typical layout of the paper, then you will recognize immediately that that is a quadratic equation, right? Because what I've seen in the past is people will multiply this out, and then they see, oh, it is quadratic, and then they factorize it again, and then when they factorize it again, they factorize it incorrectly, right? And they end up with two different brackets. So here, guys, hopefully you can recognize that we have two brackets multiplied together equals 0. So the first bracket must be equal to 0 or the second bracket. Now, guys, this you don't have to write, actually, that line, right? And even that you also don't have to write. All you get marks for here is the two answers. So you can do that in your head if you are able to. If not, write it out like I did. Okay, there's also nothing wrong with that. But you would say, in order for the first bracket to be equal to 0, x must be 2. Because 3 times 2 is going to give you 6. Minus 6 is 0, right? And for the second bracket to be 0, x must be negative 2. Because then you have negative 2 plus 2, which is then equal to 0. Okay, please give yourself 2 marks if you got those two answers. Right, 1.1.2. Guys, as soon as you see that instruction, correct to 2 decimal places, you don't even think twice, you go straight to the quadratic formula. Okay, they won't tell you that if you are not meant to be using the quadratic formula. Alright, so quadratic formula you get a mark for. Obviously you get it on the formula sheet, right? So you shouldn't be making mistakes with the actual substitution here. Remember, this is A is positive 2, B is negative 6, and C is positive 1. Alright, so those are the values that you're using in the formula. You get 1 mark for substituting the values into the formula. So guys, if that line is not there, even if your answers are both correct, you will only get 2 out of 3. Okay, please, you have to show that. So give yourself a mark if you wrote that down, and then it's a mark for both of those answers. If you maybe rounded the 1 off incorrectly, you won't get that mark, but then you'll get the other mark. Alright, it's possible to get just 1 out of these 2 maybe. Are there any questions on that one? Okay, so hopefully you all have 5 out of 5 so far. Yes? Okay, next one. This is normally where the wheels start coming off a little bit. 1.1.3 with the quadratic inequality. Guys, firstly, it's just like a quadratic equation in the sense that you have to get everything on the one side and a 0 on the other side. Right? As soon as you see this x squared, you think everything on the one side, 0 on the other side. Yeah? Yes, you have to. I'll talk about that now. The first mark there is just for bringing that x over. But also, guys, for having it in the correct order. Right? So if you wrote this, if you have x squared minus 90 minus x greater than 0, you're not going to get the mark for that because this is not standard form. Standard form is where the x is in the middle. Okay, so you have your x squared and you have your x and you have your constant term. So you have to write it in that order, please. That is the first mark. The second mark then is for writing your critical values down. Now, like you asked, guys, you have to say CVs. If the word CVs is not there, you don't get that mark. Please mark yourself strictly now, right? So that you know going forward what not to do, yeah? I suppose, yeah, there isn't a mark there, but I don't know if there will be a mark this year. Okay, so I think rather play it safe. Either show your factorizing step, or, guys, here, you could have used the quadratic formula. Okay, but now for the quadratic formula, just be careful. You're not going to put a greater than, right? I'm worried that if you're using the quadratic formula, you might think you have a greater than thing. If you want to use the quadratic formula, you must write CVs, and then you're going to say x is equal to... Let's see, what's that going to be? Negative b, which is negative 1, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 90. all over 2a, which is 1 as well. All right, but if you're using the quadratic formula, you have to write CVs there already. Okay, please, that's important. But the mark is actually only given, last year it was only given for the actual values. So for x equals 10 or x equals -9, again, you have to say CVs there. Guys, if you're not saying CVs, then it looks like this is the answer to the question. Right? That's why they take off that mark if that's not there. And this is not the answer to the question, right? X is not 10 or -9. It's actually greater than 10 or smaller than -9. So that's why you have to put CVs there. Now from there, you draw your very rough parabola, right? Guys, don't draw in a y-axis. Alia? What do you mean? How did you get them before?
So once you move your x over and make it x squared minus x minus 9, and then you say CV and then you put it equal to 0.
Oh, yes. That's fine. Yes. Yeah. All right. Now, guys, again, last year they didn't actually give a mark for showing the graph, but you have to show the graph in order to get to the answer. Okay. So please, I've seen this many times. People think, oh, I'm not going to lose a mark, so I'm going to leave it out. But then they get the answer wrong because it's not there. Okay, so please do draw your graph. Why did I circle the top ones? Because this question is asking for where this whole function, the parabola, is greater than 0. Where it is positive. Right? This line is telling me greater than 0, so positive. So it's the positive parts. The parts of the parabola that are above the x-axis. Now you need to be able to write that in your answer in x form. So you're going to say if it's on this side, it's to the left of -9, right? So where x is smaller than -9. Or, guys, if it's two parts, you have to write or in between, please. Here to the right of 10. So where x is greater than 10. If you did this, if you wrote -9 smaller than x smaller than 10, you can get 1 out of 2 for that statement. Right? So basically if you wrote this section, you still get a mark for your values, but you lose the mark because it's obviously not the right section. If you write this, x smaller than -9 or x smaller than 10, you get 0 for that statement. Because these two are like conflicting statements. Because if something is smaller than -9, it's obviously going to be smaller than 10 as well. You can't write that. Okay, you get 0. And also if you did it the other way around, if you said x is greater than -9 or x is greater than 10, you also get 0 for that. So you don't get like 1 mark for the one part and then 1 mark for the other part. Okay, it has to actually make sense what you've written there. So the only way in which you can get 1 out of 2 for this last statement is if you wrote the middle part there instead of the outer parts. If you did this, that's also 0. So if your symbols are the wrong way around for the middle part, because then you've chosen the wrong section, which should be a -1, but your symbols are also wrong, which is a -2 then. Okay. All right, guys, so we have 9 marks in total so far. That's what the total is out of so far. So maybe you lost 1 or 2 here, but hopefully we're still on the right track there. Okay, the next question, 1.1.4. The first mark there was for isolating the surd. That's what you always have to do with a surd equation, guys. You need to get the term that has the surd in it on its own on the one side. So what I did was I just moved this one over to that side because then it's going to become positive. And I moved the 12 over to that side. But you can obviously have it the other way around as well. That's also fine. The second mark was for squaring both sides. Alright, so square there, square there. Guys, this, very important, is not just x squared plus 12 squared. x plus 12 squared is this, x plus 12 multiplied by itself. So you actually have to FOIL that out. You have to say x times x is x squared. Outer x times 12 is 12x. Inner is also 12x. And then last, 12 times 12, that is 144. So that is where I got this from, x squared plus 24x plus 144. Okay, so you have to multiply that out. When you square the 7 root x, guys, you have to square the 7 and then the square root of x. So 7 squared is 49, and the square root of x, when you square it, is just x. Right? The square root and the square will cancel each other out. The next mark was for getting it again in standard form. So now for moving this 49x over, guys, you're going to minus it, right? So you're going to say 24x minus 49x. That gives you minus 25x. From here, you can factorize, or again, you can use the quadratic formula if you wanted to. That's fine. You would then just show your substitution there. But the last mark here was for the final answers, for those two values. For both of them, you got 1 mark. Now, guys, here in this case, both solutions actually worked. But remember, with the third equation, you always have to check your answers. I don't know if you guys remember that. So just make a note there underneath 1.1.4. Check solutions, because sometimes one of your answers don't or will not work. It won't make the left hand side equal to the right hand side. If that's the case, then you have to draw a line through the equal sign and write invalid underneath. Okay, so please remember that. In this case, it didn't happen, but it could. Okay, any questions so far? We're on 13 now. 13 marks. Okay, quickly, we have 3 minutes. Let's just quickly mark that simultaneous equation. So the first mark there was for making one of them the subject. Guys, don't just go with the first number that's written there or the first variable you're going to make the subject. Look through your 2 equations. Y is the easiest one to make the subject there because it doesn't have a number in front of it. So you just move the y over to the other side, it becomes positive y, and then you move that 2 over to that side, and there you have an equation there. Okay, so if you did that, 1 mark. Second mark is then for replacing this y with 2x minus 2. Substitution, that's the second mark. Third mark is then for multiplying out and moving the 4 over. Right? Then the fourth mark is for getting these 2 values. Whether you did it by factorizing or by quadratic formula, it's fine either way. If you have 2 or negative 1, you get a mark for that. And then you have to sub them into this again, guys, this equation here, to get your 2 y values. Both of them. So you get 1 mark for getting y equals 2 or y equals negative 4. Those 2 values there.
If when you're doing like the y at like n, must you show which x you use?
Which x you have, yes. Yeah, you have to match them up. So guys, teacher is asking here, when you get your y values, do you have to show what x value it's going with? You have to. Okay, so you can't just list them. You have to say if x is 2, then y is 2. What you don't have to write down is the subbing in there. You can leave that out. Okay, you can do that on the calculator and just write your answers. Did anyone get